The chronological Bible reading for April 12th is 1 Samuel chapters 15 through 17. Saul is rejected as king, David is anointed king, and David defeats Goliath. What did Saul do that was so terrible that God would remove the kingdom from him, literally tear it from his hands? When God tells Saul through the prophet Samuel, go and destroy the Amalekites, save none of them, leave nothing behind, don't take any plunder or spoil for yourselves, go and destroy them. They're wicked, they're offering children through fire to sacrifice to their gods, they're raping and pillaging and stealing and inhibiting the advancement of the kingdom of Israel. They're rotten to the core. You can spare none of them. Saul goes and he spares the king, King Agag. Why? Did Saul see himself in that other king? Did Saul create in his mind an excuse saying, this guy's like me. I am a king too. Kings don't deserve to die. Maybe it was something else. But whatever the case, we know that Saul spared the king. And that's not all he did. He allowed the troops to keep sheep and oxen and plunder. When questioned about this by Samuel, Saul made excuses. Oh, I didn't want them to keep the sheep or oxen. I had to let them, though. I was afraid they were going to rebel against me. He had more fear of the men he was leading than the God who was leading him. Do we ever do that? Are we more concerned about the opinion of the people around us? Maybe even the people who work for us, the people we are leading, like perhaps our children? Are we more concerned about what people think than what God thinks? We have to be careful about judging Saul in our hearts. Many of us may do the same thing. In addition to fearing the people more than fearing God, he makes another excuse and says, it's so that we could offer sacrifices. And Samuel famously said, it's better to obey than to sacrifice, isn't it? Never mind the fact that if you take something that is not yours, it's not really a sacrifice to give it up. A sacrifice is giving from what is yours for the benefit of somebody else. Giving of your time, giving of your resources. If you take the sheep and the oxen that were supposed to have been ended, they don't exist anymore. It's not a sacrifice to give those up. We see in all of these examples that Saul did not have a heart that was after God. He was after himself. He was basically a good guy if you look at it from an outsider's perspective. He certainly wasn't perfect, but assuredly he did not have a heart after God's own heart, seeking God's glory like David. When David was anointed king, notice he wasn't there. Just like when Saul was anointed king, he wasn't there. The difference is Saul was hiding among the supplies, perhaps taking a nap, perhaps doing something he shouldn't have been doing. Maybe he was getting a snack. We don't really know. But when David was not there, it's because he was doing what he was supposed to do. He was tending the sheep. He was a good shepherd, like Jesus, who is the good shepherd. When Saul went into battle, he preserved the one who looked like him, the king. He took what wasn't his. He was concerned for his own safety and blamed the troops for not doing what they should do. When David goes into battle against Goliath, he doesn't do it with a concern for his own safety. He doesn't do it with a concern for his own name. He says, this uncircumcised Philistine has defied the armies of the living God. It doesn't matter that I'm just a youth, maybe a teen, maybe even younger. None of this matters. I will go and risk my life because God is going to get the victory. The question that came to mind for me in reading this morning was, how do we know when God's going to get the victory? How do we know if God is going to hand us over to our enemies because of the sin in the camp? There were plenty of times when the Israelites went out to war and they were defeated because God was not with them. How did David know that God was with him, that God was going to defeat Goliath through him, and that this would be a turning point in the battle? There was a spirit of humility that was on David that was not on Saul. Saul made excuses. He shifted blame. He projected. He did not take responsibility. He did not fulfill his role as king. David's just some kid. Some scholars believe he was as young as 8 years old when he defeated Goliath. He may have been 15. Nonetheless, he was a young guy compared to an experienced giant, and he was confident because his confidence did not rest in his own ability. He was righteously outraged that God's reputation was being maligned. What's more is he understood who God was. He understood what God cared about. He had spent time meditating on the law of God day and night. He knew the heart of God. And so with boldness, depending on God's provision and God's salvation, he moved forward and he got the victory. May we be like David, hearts steadfast, getting to know the God who made us so that we can walk with him, so that when we see things going on in this world, we have God's perspective. The problem with the church today is that many do not know God's perspective. Many know about God, but they don't really know him. Do we really know him? Do we know how he feels about social issues? Do we know where God stands on abortion or gay rights or any of those things? Do we know? Or are we just believing what we've been told by other people? Friends, we must know the heart of God for ourselves so that we can take a bold stand for him, not for ourselves. And in that way, we will glorify his holy name. God bless you, my friends. Thank you for being on this journey with me. We'll see you tomorrow.